My parents were standing in the center of the room and shouting at each other. Dad shouted at Mom so loudly that I thought I was going to go deaf. And Mom was so angry that she was ready to grab a chair and throw it at him. I didn't know what to do or how to react, so I just ran to my room. Even after I closed the door, the screams continued to come, and I could clearly hear their words. I fell on the bed, groping for my headphones and putting them on my head. I turned on the music so loudly that I could not hear them. Then, burying myself in my pillow, I began to cry. I got up early in the morning, I got dressed, and quickly ran away from home without even having a snack. I knew that in the morning, after my parents had been arrested, after yesterday's fight, they would start to fight again, and I didn't want to hear it anymore. I was walking to school and thinking about my classmates, how they'd come home and sit down at the table with their parents and discuss how their day was. I was very jealous of them. My parents had been fighting for a long time, for several years. These were small and rare fights that happen to everyone. For several years, these were small and rare fights that happened to everyone. But over time, they began to occur more and more often, and the fights themselves became more serious. If you're interested, the whole reason for their fighting is our poverty. Dad works 2 jobs, but both pay negligibly little, and Mom works at home and looks after our neighbor for money. They work so hard that it's amazing that they find time to sort things out at all. On the way to school, I went to the supermarket to buy a chocolate bar. There was a big TV at the checkout, and an advertisement for a super lottery was running on it, where the main prize was a trip to a ski resort and $100 million. Can you imagine what you could buy with that amount of money? I also can't. I handed the cashier a chocolate bar and $100. The cashier smiled and asked if I wanted to test my luck and buy a lottery ticket. For some reason, he added that I could win a trip to the resort for the whole family. These words made me think about my parents. In fact, they were very good and have always tried, and are now trying to ensure that our family lives in prosperity. They were just tired. They hadn't spent time together for so long, and they needed a rest. It was hard for me to do it. I have been saving this $100 for a long time and wanted to buy something new instead of these rags that I have to wear. But now I believe that even such a meager chance to make my family happy was worth the money. When I left the store, I thought, what the hell did I just do? The lottery for $100? Only a perfect idiot like me could do that. All day at school, I berated myself for this spontaneous purchase. And the worst thing is that when I came home, my mother asked me for the $100 to pay the electricity bill, which it turns out we owed a long time ago. I didn't lie to her, and I told her the whole truth. My mom wanted to yell at me, but she didn't have time because the lights suddenly went out all over the house, and we found ourselves in pitch darkness. Yes, they turned off our electricity for non-payment. We dined by candlelight. Even though it was very dark in the living room, I could see how upset my parents were. I know that now they were berating themselves for the fact that there was not even a light in the house. In the morning, I skipped out of the house again. I decided to go to the supermarket and try to return the ticket. The cashier replied that it wouldn't work since the lottery was held last night. He just advised me to check the winning numbers. On TV, they played a replay of yesterday's program where they showed that no one took the main prize and $10 million out of the 100, and they were still waiting for the winner. Without any enthusiasm, I took out the ticket and started checking the numbers. 4, the first number, coincided with 8, and the second one, 15. I'm lucky, 16. Wait, 23? Well, I took out the ticket and started checking the numbers. 4, the first number, coincided with 8, and the second one, 15. I'm lucky. 16. Wait, 23? Well, 42? God, I won! I won! I started screaming like crazy and dancing right in the middle of the store. The cashier could not believe it and just looked at me like I was crazy, just like the other people in the store did. I ran home as fast as I could. When I saw that my parents were going to work, I jumped into my dad's arms as if I was 4 years old, and said that he no longer needed to go there because we are rich now. My parents thought I was crazy, but I was foaming at the mouth to prove to them that I had won. Dad called work and said that he would be an hour late. The three of us got into the car and drove to the TV station. There were other people in the building who were photographed by journalists. Apparently, they were the other winners. When I turned out to one of the organizers of the contest, for some reason the music stopped. The lights in the room dimmed and the floodlights began to play with different colors. A host appeared on a small stage. He announced loudly into the microphone that they had finally gotten the main winners. A spotlight beam fell on us. The host invited us to the stage with his hand. Mom and Dad were shocked. A small cart covered with some kind of cloth was rolled out onto the stage with one movement of his hand. The host pulled off the blanket. Then we finally saw our prize. $10 million. Only now my parents realized what had happened. They didn't believe me until the last moment, until they saw the winnings. Everyone there started applauding us, and the journalists pushed each other and tried to interview us. The host said that after the award ceremony, we could go home and pack our things, because tomorrow morning we will fly to a ski resort in Alaska. When we were already at home, Mom and Dad still couldn't recover from the shock. They looked at me, praised me for my initiative, and it seems for the first time in a long time, they didn't fight. They looked so happy. I was happy that in the morning, a car was sent for us. Dad took a huge suitcase with him. Yes, our wedding was there. My father was afraid to leave it at home. As many already knew about our luck, a small private jet was waiting for us at the airport. It was just us and the pilot on board. Everything was so cool. I was looking forward to every second of the trip and was happy looking at my parents holding hands. Mom and Dad were drinking champagne. We'd already flown by the most snow-covered part of Alaska. The pilot reported that the temperature in the area now reaches -40. I looked out of the porthole and enjoyed the views. Suddenly, I noticed how something big and black flew into the engine of the plane. The engine caught fire, and the plane began to shake. The light began to flicker, and the plane began to fall. I woke up because my dad was shaking me. I opened my eyes, and he hugged me tightly. He was glad that everything was fine with his beloved Aurora. It was very cold on the plane. I looked around and saw that the aircraft covering was broken. Mom and the pilot were standing aside, arguing about something. The pilot gathered us all. He said that due to poor visibility, he had to fly lower, but apparently something very large flew into the engine. He couldn't handle the controls, but due to the low altitude and soft snow, the landing was almost successful. My parents were not happy, and the pilot himself looked guilty. I thought we should radio someone and ask for help. The pilot and I went into the control cabin. The whole dashboard sparked, and the radio hissed strangely. He was connecting the wires, and he told me to report what had happened. I tried to say something, but the radio just hissed back at me. We checked our food and water supplies, and Dad, at the same time, checked the suitcase with our prize. Everything was in its place. It's good that Mom had packed up some warm clothes now. It would be very useful to us. It was hard to think because of the cold. Dad and the pilot began to think about our plan of action. First of all, we tried to close that huge hole from where the cold was blowing. It worked. It didn't get any warmer on the plane, but at least the snow and wind stopped blowing inside. Dad and Mom began to collect everything that could burn to make a fire and keep warm. The pilot went into the control cabin, continuing to try to contact at least someone. When he returned, he just threw up his hands. He said that he was trying to convey our approximate coordinates, but he was not sure that anyone had accepted them. He would keep trying every hour. It got dark quickly. The plane was small, and it seemed like we were running out of supplies that could be burned. My fingers and toes were very cold, and I was sleepy. My eyes started to close. The pilot began to push me. My parents were indignant, but he said that no one should sleep because such coldness is deceiving, and that you can fall asleep and never wake up again. Then everyone started watching each other so that no one would sleep. The next day, the weather calmed down and snow and wind stopped tormenting us. We decided that we should go out into the forest to find dead wood or branches, since there was nothing left to burn in the plane. The pilot stayed behind to report on the radio about us. The whole family went in search of firewood, but we found very little. We were in the forest for a long time, but as soon as we heard the howling of wolves that reached us, we decided that it was time to return. The pilot saw a small pile of branches that we managed to get. He said it wasn't enough. I tried to light a fire, but the branches were a little damp, and the cold was unbearable, and my hands were trembling treacherously. Dad looked at me inside and went to a suitcase. He took many, many bundles of money from there. Now we were lighting a fire with a couple of $1 million. It was the most expensive fire of my life, but we had nowhere to go, and we tossed pack after pack until the fire finally became strong enough. Everyone was sitting by the fire trying to get warm. I could no longer resist sleep and began to fall asleep like everyone else around, but suddenly we were woken up by some noise outside the window. We quickly got out of the plane to see what it was. Imagine our delight when we saw the lights of a helicopter in the dark sky. We shouted for it to hear us, but the helicopter was going somewhere in the distance. The pilot took out a flare gun and raised up his hand. There was a click, but the life-saving flare did not fire. The pilot fell to his knees and began to sob softly, and the helicopter was going further and further away. It was necessary to do something urgently. I stood hugging Mom and thought that now we were definitely done. However, I saw my father coming towards us with a suitcase. He put it on the snow, opened it, and handed me a lighter. I've never seen Dad so confident. I understood his hint. We needed a fire to attract the helicopter, but apart from our winnings, there was probably another $6 million left. We had nothing to burn. Dad himself couldn't do it, but I could. I set fire to one bill, and the banknotes began to burn one by one until they all burst into a bright flame. The pilot, seeing this, came to his senses. He opened a bottle and poured liquid into the fire, moving further and further away. We couldn't believe it worked. Mom and Dad came up to me and hugged me tightly. We stood like that for probably a few minutes until finally we heard the rising sound of the engine. It was a helicopter. We were saved. A few days after the rescue operation in the hospital, we were sent home. We were incredibly happy to be home. All day, the phone was bursting with calls from journalists. The company even called us with apologies and offered us to go to the ski resort in Alaska again, but we refused, only to the south for now. Despite everything that we experienced and lost millions, my parents and I were happy that I've never seen them more loving and happy in my life than now. And what are you willing to do to make your loved ones happy? Share in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Hi there, my name is Haley, and I need to confess that a very ridiculous thing happened to me recently, and all because of my stupid carelessness. I have always heard that I was very distracted, but I did not expect that one day it would bring me a lot of trouble. It all started with the fact that I really liked one of my classmates. His name was Christopher, and he was not the most handsome guy, the good athlete, or even an honor student. I just admired his kindness, honesty, and willingness to help other people. I tried to talk to him as often as possible, to join his company and just be a good friend to him, and I succeeded. I began to spend every weekend with Christopher and his pals. After a while, we used to go to the movies, play football, or simply lounge around and eat pizza at someone's place. Christopher and I conversed, made fun of each other, and he even walked me home on occasion. But it didn't happen very frequently because Christopher's best friend, Phil, was usually around and never left our side for even a second. Because Phil made it so tough for us, any romance was out of the question. When Christopher and I were given the task of cleaning up the classroom, Phil jumped at the chance to assist us. And the computer students, when my computer broke down and Christopher suggested me to work with him, Phil immediately gave him his computer and then sat near Christopher instead of me. Phil even managed to ruin my Valentine's Day for the first time in my life I not only baked cookies, but also made chocolate. At our school, nobody ever gives candy to each other, only cards. But I wanted to surprise Christopher and make it clear how I felt about him. But my surprise was spoiled. Phil saw my gift right away, as soon as I took it out of my bag and started to ask me about who it was for. Soon, other guys from our group joined him. I couldn't tell Christopher I loved him, so I pretended it was a gift for all of my friends. After that, I recognized that unless I took action, I would never be able to approach Christopher. So I decided to write him a love letter and declare my thoughts that very evening. Of course, I could send him a message through Messenger, but Christopher rarely uses social media, and my message could be lost. I also didn't want to send it by text. In my perspective, language isn't appropriate for expressing my actual feelings. I was only trying to make my confession a little more romantic. As a result, I scribbled something fantastic on multiple sheets of paper, and the length didn't bother me in the least. I was pouring my heart with every word written. The next day, during gym class, I went back to the classroom earlier than all my classmates in order to secretly put my letter in Christopher's bag. But suddenly, all my confidence disappeared. I was standing near Christopher's desk for several minutes, but didn't dare put the letter in his bag. I woke up from a stupor only when I heard my classmate's voice in the hallway. There was no time left, so I tore out a notebook sheet in a hurry and wrote just a few words on it. "I love you, Haley." I threw the letter in the bag and ran out of the classroom. Since Jim was last in class, I immediately went home with the unsent love poem in my bag. The next day, I went to school expecting Christopher to respond, but he remained silent and did not act normally. I had no idea what was going on or why he was ignoring me until Phil asked to speak with me. He stated that I was so lovely and gorgeous, but he wasn't expecting anything from me, and he looked uncomfortable. I didn't realize what was going on until I saw my yesterday's note on his hands. All of my inquiries had obvious answers. My mail ended up in the wrong bag. Phil approached me and asked me to be his girlfriend. I couldn't think of anything to say. All of our classmates were watching us, and I realized that my refusal would embarrass Phil in front of them, but I really didn't care about Phil. I was solely interested in Christopher's reaction if I allowed this to happen. Therefore, I had no choice but to say yes. This caused a great delight among our classmates and big changes in my relationship with Christopher. From that moment, he detached from me in every possible way. He no longer called me to the movies and did not want to walk me home. Phil did it instead. And this fact didn't bring me any pleasure at all. I needed to break up with him, but I just didn't know how to do this. So Christopher didn't think less of me. Then I decided that since I can't leave, I will do anything to make him leave me. As a first step, I asked Phil to walk me home every day and carry my bag. Of course he agreed. Have you ever heard jokes that girls' bags are so heavy because they carry bricks in them? I literally put bricks in my bag, and this was done to specifically discourage Phil from helping me. During our dates, I specifically spoke only about fashion, cosmetics, and other female things, not letting Phil say a word in, causing him to get bored instead of hanging out with our friends. I made Phil go to the library with me to do our homework. I would take him to obscure performances and even made us volunteer. So on weekends, we cleaned out cages of animals at the shelter and removed garbage around the city. Believe me, breaking up with Phil was a very difficult task for me. I tried to show him that we were different and didn't fit each other. And along with that, I still had to keep my own dignity. As bad luck would have it, Phil was very energetic and extremely patient. He saw only good things in everything. And as it seemed to me, he even enjoyed what we did. Seeing that, my plan was not working. I decided to take even more radical measures. I secretly listened to all the conversations between Phil and his friends and wrote down all the dates when he was going to go to a movie or play football with them. And then on those exact dates, I would call him for various picnics and dates. Sometimes I would even ask him to urgently help me with something last minute. He once skipped his friend's birthday party because he was helping my grandfather lug things out of the garage. Yes, I've done awful things, but only to make Phil consider ending our relationship. When Phil was looking at me, he soon stopped smiling. His inexhaustible supply of delight had dried up, and he appeared to be quite fatigued. He even began to refuse our dates, claiming to be ill or making some other excuse. Meanwhile, my relationship with Christopher had completely vanished, but Phil had made no attempt to end it. I even enrolled him in a chess club, knowing how much he disliked the game, and I was desperate because Phil kept inviting me out. Finally, having received another invitation for a date, I realized that all my efforts were in vain, and I lost any hope to start a relationship with Christopher. Another date with Phil took place as usual. I talked incessantly, and he silently listened to all that nonsense I was chatting about. But suddenly he interrupted me and asked me to listen to him. He spent a lot of time telling me that I was wonderful and kind, that I was a good activist volunteer, and so on. But then he suggested that we break up. You can't imagine how happy I was to hear that. Phil referred to the fact that we just had two different interests, and I gladly supported him. I think it looked very strange when we both let out a sigh of relief. The next day, I brought my long love letter to school, since Christopher and I were very distant from each other. During my relationship with Phil, I decided that I had nothing to lose. Therefore, after class, I gave Christopher the love letter and told him everything about it. I told him that my gift for Valentine's Day and the love confession were intended for him. He read my letter with undisguised surprise, and I looked at the floor embarrassed, not daring to lift my gaze to him. Suddenly, Christopher grabbed my hand and told me that he loved me all this time. But when he found out that I like Phil, he decided not to interfere in our relationship and therefore decided to avoid me. He was also the one who persuaded me to start dating. My ears couldn't believe what they were hearing. Christopher and I would have been dating for a long time if I had put the confession in the right bag that day. Yes, I blushed. Christopher proposed me to be his girlfriend with a kind giggle. Of course, I answered yes. That day when we spoke with Phil and told him about the situation, I even mentioned the bricks in my luggage to him. Phil, however, had a great sense of humor and was not offended by either me or Christopher. The scenario worked out well, and I gained a good boyfriend as well as a good friend. Thank you for listening to my story. Have you ever had incidents like mine with love letters or maybe an unsuccessful love confession? Share your story in the comments, and don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to our channel. Guys, that's enough. Stop it. I was shouting while watching millionaire friends fighting over me. I tried to separate them, but of course nothing came of it. It all started with an ordinary skirmish, and then it turned into a real fight. As soon as they calmed down, their bodyguards immediately approached and began to fight each other. While the guys were coming to their senses, one of the bodyguards suddenly pulled out a pistol and pointed it at the other, but the latter managed to react and knocked out the first one with a stun gun. Damn, how dare you knock out my bodyguard? One of the millionaires snarled fiercely at the other. Keep your mouth shut. Chuck, the other millionaire, explained that he was actually defending me. They clenched their fists and moved closer to each other, preparing to fight again. But I stepped in between them and stretched my arms out to the sides. Colin and Chuck quickly regained their composure. I didn't need their attention, so one of them hugged me and asked if I was okay, and the other took a bottle of cold water from his backpack for me. Colin and Chuck followed me out of the schoolyard after I shoved them both away and tried to explain something. Then I caught the bus, knowing that they would not follow me because they disdained using it. At home, I was gripped by panic. Their fight for me went beyond reason. At first, they were literally showering me with expensive gifts. Then they were writing love letters. And now they're fighting out of shame for them. I just wanted to break my forehead with my palm because I didn't understand how friends become enemies. My name is Catherine, and this is my story of two former best friends who were millionaires fighting for my attention for several weeks. Now I'm getting tired of it because neither Colin nor Chuck are my favorites. It all began when I was sent to a new school. My former school burned down, and I was able to quickly demonstrate myself when, in a chemistry lesson, I nearly set fire to the classroom, owing to incorrect chemical proportions. Many people joked that I was the one who had set fire to the last school. These jokes had no effect on me, and all I did was chuckle in return, after which everyone began to converse with me. The truth is, with my charm and beauty, I have an incredible ability to win people over. This is apparently how I won the hearts of these two attractive gentlemen. Yes, these are Chuck and Colin, the most popular and rich boys in the entire school, if not the entire city. They treated me to sweet things in the canteen and expressed their interest in me, and after classes, they stopped next to me in a limousine and invited me for a ride. I didn't refuse because I've never rode in a limousine before. As a result, we drank delicious cocktails in the salon, listened to music, and then I leaned out through the roof and began to scream with joy. When I got home and logged into my Instagram account, I saw a bunch of messages from Chuck and Colin. I thought they just wanted to be friends with me, not yet realizing that they had already started to fight for me. This was why I actively responded to both of them, sending funny memes and videos. And there began the mess. A few days later, Chuck met me outside the classroom with a huge bouquet of flowers. Then Colin came up to me and also held a bouquet in his hand. It was, however, not from flowers, but rather my favorite sweets. The guys exchanged angry looks, and I didn't know what to say. After all the classes were completed, I witnessed Chuck and his Jeep smash into Colin's sports car, completely ruining it. Colin was enraged and rushed over to the Jeep, running the key down the car's body. Other males gathered around and began to watch the two rich guys showdown with bated breath. I didn't realize what was going on until they both contacted me in the evening. Colin and Chuck both informed me that they liked me and they wanted to date me. For some reason, I hung up since I didn't know what to say, as I didn't like any of them, and I informed them about that in the morning. The guys just smiled and even answered me the same way, saying that I would change my mind. I didn't want them to bother me at all, and what's more, compete with each other. However, they had a different opinion and showed themselves in all their glory. One morning, I saw a brand new Mercedes near my house with a note attached to it. It was a gift from Colin, who wanted a beautiful girl to have a beautiful car. I immediately called him and said that I did not need his gift. At school, another surprise awaited me, but this time it was from Chuck. Money and jewels showered down on me as soon as I walked into the classroom. Then Chuck approached me and claimed that he would go to any length for me. Colin was enraged and instantly fought with Chuck, and they began to call one another names and even shove each other, but the class teacher separated them. I tried to persuade them that there was no need to fight for me because I didn't want to date either of them, but they were uninterested. Then I tried to destroy both of their hearts at the same time by shamelessly flirting with our classmate. I wish I hadn't done this. Chuck's bodyguard intimidated that guy while Colin ordered a trash truck that knocked over the stinky leftovers on his car. After that incident, that classmate was immediately transferred to another school, while the rich guys tried in vain to get my attention. Then I decided to just ignore them. Perhaps this way they would understand that they, along with their expensive gifts, were not interesting to me. However, they managed to evoke vivid emotions in me. For example, Chuck was standing on the edge of the school roof and attaching my photo, which was 3 stories high, while I begged him to get it down. And Colin painted the walls of the school with declarations of love for me. I yelled at both of them and said that they were stupid. I couldn't stand dealing with them any longer. I couldn't understand why they were so obsessed with me that they had gone insane. We didn't know each other at all. We hadn't spoken in a long time until that fateful chemistry class. Where did this craze originate? It seemed as though I had been marked as a millionaire's target. The wealthy individuals appeared to have realized that they would not be able to achieve their goals in this manner. As a result, They decided to take action through my parents. My father came home from work one day in a high mood and informed me that he had been promoted. My mother and I were both surprised because she was promoted on the same day as my father. And then I discovered that my mother worked for a company owned by Chuck's family, while my father worked for a company owned by Colin's family. At that moment, I freaked out and asked my parents to transfer me to another school as I was bothered by the current one. When I recounted the scenario to my parents, they simply chuckled and told me that I should be pleasant because such wonderful and, more importantly, high-status men loved me. Happy? They irritate me to no end. Chuck and Colin continued to pamper me in every way imaginable over the next few days, seeking attention via various means and removing any individuals who looked at me in an unfavorable light. As a result, 2 of the guys were transferred to another school, and the third, along with his family, departed the city. And there was a quarrel with which I began my evening's narrative. The idea that they could injure themselves was stuck in my head. I understood that this could not continue anymore, and that I apparently would have to choose between them. Maybe then they would calm down. The next day, Chuck drove a luxurious limo right to my house to pick me up. While across the street, Colin was waiting for me in a Lamborghini. In the end, I got into the limo with Chuck. He took me to the airport, and then we flew to Sydney on a date at a huge oceanarium. It was very interesting and exciting, but this whole situation was bothering me. Chuck was speaking in pathos about the types of fish and the fact that he was fond of diving and saw many fish in the real ocean, but I almost did not listen to him. I felt uneasy on a date with him. However, after that, Colin calmed down. At least I thought so. But it turns out he wasn't going down without a fight. The guy placed a large sum of money on my desk with a note instructing me to spend it on my necessities and then return to him for a date at Seattle's most expensive restaurant. After witnessing, this guy became enraged. He approached Colin and smacked him in the face so hard that he fell to the ground and slammed his head hard against the floor. Colin did not rise from the floor, but lay still with his eyes closed. He appeared to be unconscious. Some of the guys immediately dialed 911. He was rushed to the hospital, and everyone was concerned. Even Chuck was really sad. Probably he didn't think that the situation would have come to such outcomes. And after all the lessons, he did not wait for me as he usually did, but left somewhere, perhaps to the hospital, to visit a former friend. I was also worried about Colin very much. In the class chat, various gossips were spread. For example, that he had lost his memory and that he was in a coma and that Chuck had broke his skull. Every time I was imagining scary pictures and threw the phone away with tears in my eyes. Only a couple days later, it became clear that Colin had been lying unconscious for a whole day, and when he came to his senses, he couldn't remember anything for several hours. He did, however, swiftly regain his memories. Chuck had also been in his room for days, it turned out. I was relieved to hear that, but even more so, when they arrived at school together, Chuck and Colin were still arguing, and eventually cooled down. This gave me a big sense of comfort. However, these 2 wealthy men banded together to oppose me. Because I rejected both of them at the same time, they claim I have become an attention seeker and an arrogant girl. As a result, they stopped giving me presents and began to perform dirty tricks on me in whatever manner that they could exact revenge. Now, instead of money, I saw smelly and disgusting rubbish on my desk. Shameful photographs of me were hanging on the walls at school, and everyone was laughing at them. And my parents had expected to be demoted at work. They were upset, but at least they didn't have to endure the antics of the rich. But that's not all. On my birthday, Colin and Chuck slapped a rotten fish cake in my face in front of everyone, and they gave me another gift. When I left school, a huge amount of disgusting green mucus was poured on me right in front of my house. Everyone around me was laughing at me, and as I started crying, Colin and Chuck hurled insults at me. I was trembling with rage and fury. I wanted to hide somewhere away from everyone and maintain a low profile for the rest of my life. I've never been bullied so much in my life. My patience had finally run out. I flipped out on the rich people and then managed to persuade my parents to send me to a different school. Seeing my anger and despair, they agreed, and after that, my life became the same, quiet and harmless again. I blocked Chuck and Colin everywhere, tried not to come close to that school, and also kept away from all the elite places so as not to accidentally come across any of them at all. This was so unpleasant for me that I even had to consult a psychologist to heal my emotional traumas. What would you do if you were obsessively courted by 2 millionaire friends? Give your answers in the comments. Click on the thumbs up button below the video and share it with your friends.